just start naming different witnesses. I have Tim Ley. I hope I said that right.
Finally, this evening we go to Arizona to dwell briefly on the unknown. We admit, just a little suspicious.
The latest chapter into a strange valley encounter.
3 months ago tonight, something strange happened in the skies over Arizona that still hasn't been fully explained. And in reality, we may never know exactly what happened that night. Tonight, first on Fox, we hear from a Phoenix family who may have been closer to whatever it was in the sky, closer than anyone else.
It's getting closer and closer, and we're saying, you know, that thing's coming right at us.
Witnesses who claim to have had a better look described a delta-shaped craft.
It was a perfect triangle just floating across the sky, way up there.
This family says it flew slowly and silently over their house.
The tip literally came right across our street, and the right arm went right over us, just like a subway train, watching it go by. The first light, the second light, third light.
A local special effects company created these computer-enhanced conceptions from videotapes and descriptions.
We have determined that this formation of lights, when it came to rest, was over a mile long.
The Lees first saw the lights while looking north from their home in the Sunny Slope Mountains.
When it finally got here and we realized this thing was coming right over us, we really started getting antsy. And then when it went direct overhead without a sound, it was like that. It was so big.
These images of what they saw are made on a computer. They're a combination of digital photos of the landscape taken by Lee and computer drawings of the objects his family saw in the sky.
It was a giant V, all right? And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
You just didn't know what to do. You know, it was just like, my God, how big is this thing? It didn't seem threatening because when it was right overhead and we couldn't hear a sound, it was like you're just awestruck.
Jim Delatoso has been researching UFOs for 20 years. Right now, he's in the middle of putting together a virtual reality model of what happened that night. He's talked to hundreds of witnesses about the night of March 13th, including the Lees.
He thinks that he said if he had a tennis ball, he could have hit it. He could have thrown a tennis ball at it. It was that close.
It was very close. He just could have nailed it.
I consider Tim Ley and his family to be very reliable and very important in the data that they've given us because they were so close that they could look up and, as they said, almost touch it.
The last light went right over my wife and I, and there was no light on the ground. But I could see up inside that it was almost like a recess, and it had fluorescent like light inside, like a gas light of some kind.
This is the first time in the series of reports of that night that someone said that they looked up and saw a structured object.
As it went over, it went straight like through this V right there, over that guy's house.
It took about 15 minutes to get from when we first saw it all the way till we couldn't saw it.
We just re-experience it every time we tell it. You know, it's like it was just yesterday, you know. We've just never seen anything like it. I
was always a very polite skeptic. I would never tell someone, if they told me they saw something, I would never say, you're a liar or anything like that, because I don't know. But now I don't know what to think, because this is impossible.
Bring up the eerie music, please.
People were seeing these lights that either seemed to be attached to something or had a force field in between, because when they looked up, they blocked out the stars in between the lights.
Dr. Lynn Kitai reflecting on what she saw back on March 13th, 1997, a string of lights shaped in a V hovering above the valley skies.
Going through my mind, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you.
That it was at least big as a football field, at least.
As it got closer, it got kind of spooky because there was no noise with it. It was completely silent.
No noise. Not a sound. Not a sound. Totally quiet.
You heard nothing. Absolutely nothing.
The Air Force told UPN News 13 it no longer investigates UFOs since Project Blue Book was closed in 1969. Barwood sent letters to senators looking for answers and was told the same thing.
They do not do investigations on UFOs. Now, what is interesting to me is in these days of terrorism, We don't have anybody investigating anything that invades our airspace.
Even a commercial airline pilot here at Sky Harbor Airport reported seeing the lights last night. He radioed the tower just after takeoff, telling them that the object was directly above him. That means that air traffic controllers in the tower should have picked the object up on their radar screens. And yet they say they saw nothing.
Okay, well, I think that's good then for witnesses.
For the witness section.
The governor's press junket, if you will, was that the press release, right? Was that the thing? Which
I
is
think
fine
that
if that's what it is.
qualifies as the official statement.
What did all those people see passing over them in Phoenix that March 13th? And what was the huge light display at 10 o'clock at night? Former Phoenix City Councilwoman Frances Emma Barwood is the only city official to look for answers, and she has paid a price for it. When Barwood proposed to her colleagues that they at least ask some questions, she was met with a stony, chilling silence.
Kind of curious, especially since people are starting to ask more questions. Thanks. Thank you. Councilman Siebert.
After the meeting was over, one of the deputy city managers came over to me and said, "You shouldn't have asked that question." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, you just opened Pandora's box. They didn't want to deal with it."
Barwood was shunned, ridiculed, poked fun at in political cartoons. Governor Fife Symington, on the verge of being indicted for bank fraud and misrepresentation, made a complete joke out of it.
Escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
Is there any other sort of official response, like the Air Force release a statement? Basically, no press releases, no statements.
Well,
or there were statements.
Well, I believe the Air Force did make an official statement. You'll have to find this one. Okay, so here's something to look into, and I might be able to help you find it. I know I came across it while I was doing research for the Phoenix Lights. The reason why we know that the second event that happened around 10:15 was flares was because a news reporter did end up contacting the PR official of the Air Force, who then revealed that the flare incident was something called Operation Snowbird. So that was an official statement from the Air Force.
I know the Maryland Air National Guard also made a statement in a news conference and even showed a map. I have video footage of that. I even have video footage of a news crew going out just days later after Phoenix Lights and watched another flare training exercise, and they filmed it, and it looks identical to the Phoenix Lights.
Well, it's a possible explanation into those mystery lights that appeared over the valley in March.
But some of you aren't buying it. 12 News has video that might explain what was going on. Let's start with pictures that were taken on March 13th. Many of you saw this row of lights as they hovered above the valley horizon. Now, take a close look at these pictures that we shot just last night. These are flares that the Air Force was dropping near Gila Bend. Now let's go back to the video from March. You'll remember the lights faded out one by one. Let's take a look. You're going to see how they're slowly fading out one by one. And again, looking back at those flares from last night, they also burn out one by one. There they go.
Illumination flares like those recorded by KPNX on June 25th are used by military aircraft to light up battlefields and expose targets during night combat. Dropped from high-altitude aircraft and attached to tiny parachutes, the flares, which descend very slowly, can burn brightly for up to 5 minutes.
When we saw those lights pop on in the sky, to us they looked exactly the same. The photographer and I just looked at us and goes, "Well, there's your light."
Well, identical to the second part of the Phoenix Lights.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I see. That's the thing. When you watch like news segments on it, they don't break it down into two different events.
Right.
You know
that's
what I mean?
that's actually a really interesting point, because really I think there was two separate events, but looking back at it historically, things get mixed together.
And maybe that's where some of the confusion is of why these explanations don't line up, because there were two separate things going on.
Right.
And they get confused because any segment I watched, everything I looked into was all about these lights. That's it. No other things. So, oh, Marcus, how many you got here? Look at this guy. There we go. Marcus double fisting. All right. So yeah, that's interesting. All right. Well, we'll include that, right? That there's this, you know, that's interesting. So,
well, I think that it's important to also note that we know it was two separate incidents because we can look at when the reports came in. We know reports came in across Arizona from like 7:22 to 8:30 from northern Arizona all the way over Phoenix. And then we also know the time of the incident that happened just southwest of Phoenix, which was the flare drop. And we know that the Air Force said that was us, or the Maryland National Guard rather said that was us. So they're admitting that whatever happened after 10 o'clock was them. Does that discredit the thousands of calls that were made to police and news outlets from 7 o'clock to 8:30? So I think that the Maryland National Guard taking credit for the second part sort of proves that there was two separate incidences, because they're not saying they were a part of anything from 7 to 8. But that's when most of the reports
during
came.
that time. Yeah, that's interesting. All right. Yeah, that is interesting.